U-GeekTV.
So back in my trailer reaction, I expressed that I was pretty excited about the Deliverance. Did it deliver? More or less. Let's get into it.
If you believe, you shall be saved. You shall be saved.
Welcome back to U-GeekTV. I am your host, Jarius, the Unapologetic Geek, and I am back with another unapologetic review. And this time we are talking about the Deliverance. Spooky. So, like normal, on the front end, I'm going to give the spoiler-free review, and on the back end, pause, I am going to do a spoilery discussion because there is an element or two that I want to talk about when it comes to this film. And without further ado, let's go with the spoiler-free review. You know what I like about Lee Daniels? He's not afraid to step outside the box a little bit. And one thing that Precious taught me is that this man knows how to do horror. And yes, Precious is not a horror movie, but there are a lot of horrible things. And honestly, it is a black horror movie classic, for better or for worse. I'll never watch it again. That shit scared the shit out of me. And yeah, it's a horror movie on the unapologetic side of things. Trust me. But anyways, the Deliverance stars Andra Day as Ebony Jackson, Glenn Close as her mother, and Monique, who, look, Monique being in a Lee Daniels movie in 2024, didn't have that on my bingo card at all. But here we are. They have put aside their feud. And let me just say, Monique is such a great actress, like in anything. Whether it's comedic or horror or drama, this woman can act, and she is such a treasure when it comes to this film. Like, she was delightful. There's one point where her mannerisms and her nonverbal acting are so great that I just stopped and I just had to just acknowledge just how good of an actress she is. But anyways, the Deliverance takes us on a journey that is honestly based on a true story. And look, the true story of this, like looking up what happened, is a little bit more unsettling than what they gave us in the film. And I'm not going to spoil it on this side, but there are some things that happen that are supernatural, that there are eyewitness accounts in the actual story. Like, something that you would think is dramatized is something that several people actually witnessed when it comes to this. Yeah, it's, it is pretty scary. It's some spooky shit. And Lee Daniels has a good eye for spookiness. Like, it's very atmospheric. The one thing about doing any kind of movie with an exorcism in it, you're gonna get compared to The Exorcist. The Exorcist is the gold standard of how these movies are executed, so much so that their own sequels can't surpass what the original did. It's very hard to have a good demon possession movie that's on par with The Exorcist. And for the most part, The Deliverance does a good job of following in The Exorcist's footsteps, but it doesn't surpass that film in any way. So at this point, when it comes to like doing an Exorcist movie, what I look for is what's unique about this movie, because it's just impossible to pass the original. And what's unique here is this is more of a Pentecostal, like Baptist church setting. I haven't seen that before. I expressed that in my initial reaction to the trailer when it came out. I haven't seen that before, and this makes it different. And honestly, it hits a little bit more home as a kid who grew up in that type of church. So Ebony's youngest son is experiencing a possession, and it's not just impacting him, it's impacting the entire family. A lot of things unfold, and eventually we get to like the Exorcist side of things, and that's when this film really comes alive. It's like two different plots that are taking place at the same time, but everything kind of pulls together well. What I really appreciate this is the way they tackle generational curses and generational trauma, and they put it in a context of horror, which allows for the demonic possession side of it. Like, both of those things work in tandem surprisingly well, like to the point where I'm like, why didn't I consider that those two things could work in harmony? But Lee Daniels pulls both elements together perfectly to make a genuinely solid horror movie. Now I know I talked a little bit about Monique and her outstanding performance, but Glenn Close, another consummate professional, is right behind her. Glenn Close is definitely that hood rat, um, like trap queenish type of Caucasian lady that you saw like growing up. And I didn't grow up in the hood. But I've had a lot of friends that did and grew up in different situations than me. And I didn't grow up in like this white picket fence neighborhood or anything like that. But I did grow up in Mississippi. And yeah, I know some of those Glenn Close type people that are in this film, like the crazy ass Caucasian lady who, oh, yeah, and Lee Daniels plays into this a lot. Who loves black men and all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to get into the objectification of our race and all that kind of stuff. It kind of is what it is. That's a different discussion for another day. But for better or for worse, it's in here. But Glenn Close, she does a good job in the role that she's given. So yeah, big ups to her. Andra Day kind of got a little shaky a little bit, but yeah, I mean she was fine too. What's the bigger discussion here, and I'm going to get into it on the spoiler side of things, is how religious this film is. That surprised me. Like they really go at the Pentecostal, the down south kind of Baptist religion a little bit here, and I have some thoughts on it. So I get into that in the spoiler side of things. But right now, we're going to get to the verdict. My biggest issue with this film is that the ending kind of falls flat. It just does. Like they play with some things that they should have just really went ahead with, but it got a little bit too artsy for its own good. Lee Daniels kind of feeling itself, and I feel like that serves to the detriment of a film that has a really strong first and second act. It's just the third act, it kind of gets a little too it does a little bit too much. It starts to rely on those old horror tropes a little bit too much. And I just wasn't feeling it. And so that actually hurt the overall grade for this. So for me, the Deliverance on Netflix, it gets a unapologetically I film. It's a 3 out of 5. Like we were almost there. We were almost to being a legit film, and maybe even a superb one, but it took some steps back in the third act that I can't get past. So now let's get into the spoiler discussion. And this is gonna be a little bit more religious on that side of things. Now, I'm not going to preach to you or anything like that. I just have some thoughts on the religious aspect of the film. Lee Daniels definitely did his homework. I don't know a lot about his background, but I can imagine the type of church that he went to. And I was in this church. The thing is, the pastor that I had, she wasn't all about like the prosperity or anything. We learned a lot about fire and brimstone, and the Deliverance made sure to bring the fire and the brimstone side of it. There's a scene where Glenn Close's character goes to a character played by Tasha Smith, who is the pastor at the local church. Glenn Close's character has turned her life around not too long ago, has found Jesus, and she recognizes that they are under spiritual warfare with this demon. And she goes to her pastor for help, and his pastor says, "Look, we don't do this here." Earlier in this film, that pastor is talking about like prosperity and talking about um, the happiness of the Lord and all that kind of stuff. One thing is, you can't acknowledge God and not acknowledge the devil. Uh, Anything beyond that is usually just fodder. You just you're just all about the money and all that kind of stuff. That's just how I feel about it. You got to talk about both sides of it. You got to talk about the unsettling, scary stuff. It's in the Bible. They are two sides of the same coin, essentially. If you got God, you got to have the devil. If you got to have the devil, you got to have some God talk too. You can't have it you can't have it one way or the other. And I loved that scene so much because it's something you don't normally see. there are a lot of preachers who don't want to talk about it because they don't want to scare the they don't want to scare the saints away. They don't want to scare the money away. Like you gotta give it to everybody straight. You can't teach some of the Bible. You have to teach all of it. And the devil is a significant part of the Bible. Like we all agree on that, right? Another thing that I liked is there is an evangelist in this film that ultimately kicks off the deliverance portion of it when they try to exorcise the demon from Ebony's son. And she went against this demon before. This demon kills basically everyone in the family in the house that it occupies. And she had gone against it before, and her faith was shaken. And I appreciate that they came back to that in this film, and she got another shot at this demon, and her faith was shaken as she was performing the exorcism. If you're on this side of it, you probably already seen it. She ultimately loses her life because she didn't believe enough, and that's kind of where the ending of this film kind of falls apart for me.
Give me back my child!
That motherfucker don't love you. Nobody loves you. Not that nigga that left you. Certainly not your bitch-ass mother.
My mother loves me. She was a child of God. I rebuke you, Satan, in the name of Jesus. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Because he lives inside me. I'm a child of God.
Wait, don't!
I rebuke you, Satan. Jesus.
I think it would have been better served had they had the evangelist and Ebony joined together. And it kind of goes into where two or more are gathered in my name, I am among them, which is, I may have butchered that verse, but it is the verse in the Bible. I think that serves better, but having an evangelist die, like this didn't be so powerful that it kills an evangelist, and a woman who just like literally found her faith maybe 2 days ago because she couldn't deny what was happening to her, be the person to overcome that alone. I know what they were going for. Like it was the belief in God and a mother's love that got them out of this situation, that got her through, and that the presence of the Lord is what bound the demon away from her. But I think that kind of undersells the evangelist character a little bit too much for me. And I didn't really like the ending. On top of that, they drew the ending out a little bit too much. Like I knew what Lee Daniels was going for, but it was kind of to the point where you were like, okay, get on with it. You have the demon beat Ebony down and then contort her body and all this kind of stuff, and then she gets up and it's just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And when we really could have gotten to the same place a lot cleaner, in my view. But all of that gets me to like my last point. I've seen a lot of people who probably haven't even sat down and watched this movie just kind of come against it from a church standpoint, saying that it was a little bit too much and all that kind of stuff. And I can understand like the language and the way the plot goes on. I wouldn't recommend this to the real saints like that because I know how the elders and how those people can be. However, you also have to acknowledge that the world does have secular elements. Like people really do talk like this. Now I understand that there are ways to get around that, but it kind of is what it is. And this is about entertainment at the end of the day. But if you've gone to these like down south Baptist Pentecostal churches and you can stomach the secularness of this, there is a good religious story in here. They acknowledge the power of God. They acknowledge the force of the devil, and they acknowledge the conflict between those two and what's needed to really win when it comes to spiritual warfare. And I appreciated that about this film. I am a believer in God. I just want to make that clear. I know I get on here and I cuss and I act a fool whenever I want or whatever, but that doesn't take away from my faith at all. And this film as a piece to study spiritual warfare is exceptional. I just didn't appreciate the ending, but it is an exceptional film in that regard. And I just really recommend it to the Saints. Look, if y'all can stomach it, check this out. I feel like there is a lesson to be had in this. So, if you've seen The Deliverance, let me know what you think in the comments. Continue to like, continue to share, continue to subscribe. Thank you for everything you've done. And until next time, I'm Jarius, Unapologetic Geek, and I am out.